Welcome to the An Echo of the Past channel. I am Louis XIV, King of France and Navarre, but the world knows me as the Sun King, Le Roi Soleil. I was born on September 5, 1638, as the long-awaited heir to the throne and ruled France for 72 years, longer than any other European monarch in history. My life was not all about power and glory. It was the story of a boy who became a man amid the chaos of civil war, who had to fight for his throne before he actually sat on it. It was the story of the monarch who turned France into the most influential empire in Europe, who built Versailles, the grandest palace in the world, and who spoke famous words, "L'État c'est moi," I am the state. But it was also the story of a man who loved, suffered, doubted, and carried the weight of the crown every day of his long life. Today I tell you my story, a story of absolute power, of art and culture, of wars and diplomacy, but also of loneliness on the throne, of the losses of those I loved, and of the price I paid for being the sun, around which the whole world revolved. If you are fascinated by the fates of great monarchs, stories of power and glory, and human vulnerability, be sure to subscribe to our An Echo of the Past channel. Thank you, and I look forward to taking you through my entire life, from the boy who hid from rebels to the king who changed the face of Europe. Now let's start where it all began, in the turbulent times of my childhood, when France was burning in the flames of the civil war called the Fronde. I was born into a turbulent world, where power was not a given, but the subject of endless struggle and intrigue. It was September 5, 1638, when I was given the name Louis, and from the first moments of my life, the eyes of all France were upon me. But my childhood was no fairy tale of princes and princesses. My father, Louis XIII, left this world when I was only 4 years old, and I found myself on the throne. A king in name, but not yet in power. The real power was in the hands of my mother, Queen Anne of Austria, and her able First Minister, Cardinal Mazarin. But France was racked by internal turmoil. The nobility rebelled against royal power in a period called the Fronde. I was a small boy, but even so I understood that my childhood would be different. I saw the troops occupying Paris, my mother and the cardinal having to flee the city, my life becoming one of constant relocation and danger. I remember the times when I hid in dark chambers, when I heard the whispers and cries of the servants, when I felt the weight of responsibility falling on me before I could understand what it really meant to be king. Yet my mother taught me that a king is not just a man with a golden crown, but one who holds the fate of a nation in his hands. And I knew that one day, the time would come when I would have to show my strength. My childhood was also full of education. Teachers taught me languages, history, art, military. But most of all I learned by watching adults. How they act, how they fight, how they hide their fears behind a mask of determination. I remember the night I first felt that I was not just a boy, but a future king. It was in the Louvre Palace, watching Cardinal Mazarin negotiate with the rebels with a serious face. At that moment I said to myself, someday it will all be mine, and I will be stronger than anyone before me. Fronde taught me that power is not a gift, but a struggle, and I was prepared to fight all my life to maintain and expand my power. My childhood was not easy, but it shaped me into the man I became, the Sun King who lit the way for all of France. I was 13 years old when I was officially proclaimed monarch of full age, but the real power was not yet in my hands. Cardinal Mazarin, my mother's faithful mentor, still ran the affairs of state, and I was learning, watching, and biding my time. I remember the day of my coronation in the Cathedral of Reims. It was June 7, 1654. I stood there in my heavy royal robes, feeling the weight of the crown on my head, knowing that this moment would change my life forever. I was no longer just a boy. I was Louis, by the grace of God, King of France and Navarre. As the Archbishop placed the crown on my head, I felt the power of centuries of French kings flow through me. I was part of something greater than myself. I was the embodiment of France, of her majesty, of her glory. But the coronation was only a symbol. The real power came later. Cardinal Mazarin taught me the art of government, diplomacy, strategy, how to deal with ministers and nobility. Your Majesty, power is not just about strength, but about wisdom. You must know when to strike and when to wait, he told me. I listened to him intently. I knew this man was handing me the keys to the kingdom, and I was determined to use them better than anyone before me. But my relationship with Mazarin was not just about politics. He was also the man my mother loved. Not publicly, not officially, but everyone at court knew it. He was her mentor, her friend, perhaps even more. And I respected him because he was the reason France survived the Fronde and became stronger. In 1661, when I was 23, Cardinal Mazarin died. I remember that moment as if it were yesterday. I stood at his bedside and he said to me, "Your Majesty, you are now truly king. Rule wisely and never allow anyone else to have the power you have." When he closed his eyes for the last time, I knew my time had come. The next day, I summoned my ministers. They all expected me to appoint a new first minister to rule in my place, as Richelieu and Mazarin had done. But I had a different plan. "Gentlemen," I said to them, with a calmness, but with a firmness that allowed no doubt, "from this moment I shall have no first minister. I alone shall govern. All affairs of state will be submitted to me." I was France and France was me. I reorganized the court. I created a strict etiquette that ensured that the nobility would depend on me, not me on them. Anyone who wanted influence had to come to me, had to seek my favor. But I was not a tyrant. I was just, wise, and loyal to my people. I knew that true power lay in the people believing in their king. I also began to build my glory. I surrounded myself with artists, poets, musicians. Molière wrote plays for me. Louis composed music. I wanted France to be not only militarily strong, but also culturally the greatest. And I had a dream of a palace that would be the embodiment of my power and glory. A palace that would be the center of the world. A palace called Versailles. When I took the reins, I knew I needed more than just power in my hands. I needed a symbol that would express the power, the beauty and the eternity of my kingship. Something that the whole world would admire, and something that would also remind my subjects of who really holds the power. And so began my greatest and boldest creation, the Palace of Versailles. Versailles was no ordinary castle. It was a monument to my dreams, to my majesty, to my sun that would shine over France and all of Europe. I remember the day I first set foot on the grounds. It was only the small hunting lodge of my predecessor, but I saw the future in it. The magnificent gardens, the vast halls, the golden ceilings, and the splendor that would dazzle anyone who looked upon Versailles. Every day I personally supervised the construction. My architect, Lavaux, the landscape architect, Lenotre, and the painter Lebrun worked under my strict instructions. I wanted Versailles to become a wonder of the world. But Versailles was not just a palace. It was the heart of my kingdom, the place where I kept my nobility in check. I called them all to live with me, to be under my control. Where before they ruled freely, now they were part of me, part of my court, part of my life. I developed an elaborate system of ethics and ceremonies that ensured that each noble knew his place. None of them could act without my approval. Versailles became not only a symbol of power, but an instrument of control. During these years, I also supported the arts, music, theatre, and ballet. I believed that the king was not only a ruler, but also a protector of culture. My evenings were filled with performances of Molière, the music of Lully, and dance. I created a ballet in which I myself dance as the sun, a symbol of my light and power. But Versailles was also the place of my personal life, my family, my feelings, my solitary soul. My marriage to Maria Theresa of Austria was an alliance such as is common among powerful dynasties. I loved her, but our love was more a duty than a flame of passion. We had several children together, but my heart often yearned for something more. My heart was also full of memories of my mother, of my childhood in the turbulent times of Fronde. Even though I was a king, inside I was still the boy who sought security and love. As king, I knew that power was not something that could be held without a fight. France was surrounded by powerful neighbors and a nobility that often resisted. My reign was therefore not without wars, but also without careful diplomacy. War was the means by which I wanted to secure France, to extend her borders, and to consolidate my position in Europe. I spared no effort or expense because I knew that he who holds the sword holds the power. My first great military campaign was in the Rhineland and the Netherlands, where I sought to extend the frontiers of France. The wars with the Habsburgs were hard and exhausting, but my armies were well trained and disciplined. Diplomacy was as important as the sword. I made alliances, used intrigue and political maneuvers to weaken my enemies and strengthen France's position in the European balance of power. I believed in my brilliant plan. France must be not only the strongest country militarily, but also culturally and politically. Every victorious battle, every successful treaty was a step towards making France the center of the world. But wars brought suffering. I've seen soldiers suffer, countries suffer. It was a price of power I was willing to pay, but one I never forgot. My actions in foreign policy were sometimes criticized, but I believed that only a firm hand could lead a kingdom to greatness. My victories in diplomacy created the France that everyone knew, powerful, respected, and feared. Although I was a king with absolute power, my heart was not always only royal. It was also human, full of passion, desire, but also pain. My marriage to Maria Theresa of Austria was one of duty rather than love. It was an alliance between two powerful families, important for maintaining peace and stability. We had many children together, but few of them survived to adulthood. Each loss was a blow to me, which I often hid behind a royal mask. But my heart also belonged to women who were not my wife. I had several mistresses who were not only my love, but also my confidants and companions in a world of intrigue and loneliness. The most important of these was Madame de Montespan, who gave me several children and was my most influential companion at court. Her intelligence, beauty, and charm charmed me, but they also brought envy and rivalry among the ladies of the court. Court intrigue was a constant struggle for power and favor. Everyone wanted my attentions and thus influence over policy and decisions. I had to be careful not to take false advice and to maintain control of my court. I was a king, but I was also a man who longed for true love and understanding. I often felt lonely, surrounded by people who saw me as a symbol of power, not a man. My children were my greatest treasure, but also a source of worry. I knew I had to provide for their future, but I also felt the weight of the expectations placed on them. My relationships, my feelings, my decisions, all of these shaped my kingdom, but also my humanity. I was the Sun King, but beneath that shining crown beat the heart of a man who loved, suffered, and dreamed. The time of my reign was long. More than 70 years I sat on the throne of France. I have seen the ups and downs, wars and peace, glory and loss. But even the king who calls himself the sun can feel his rays slowly fading. As I grew older, I began to think more about what would be left of me. What will become of my work, of my power, when I am no longer among the living? My thoughts turned to the future, to my children, my grandchildren, the France I loved. I knew that the absolute power I held was fragile, that every king must one day yield to time and new winds. But I also knew that my decisions, my reforms, my dreams of France as the greatest empire in Europe would live on. My old age has not always been easy. My body weakened, my health betrayed me, but my spirit remained strong. Every day I tried to be an example to my subjects, even when I felt the weight of loneliness. I remembered my youth, the stormy days of the Fronde, the building of Versailles, my wars and my diplomacy. I knew I had changed the world, but I also felt the weight of mistakes and losses. My thoughts often went to God. I believed that my actions were guided by His will, and I asked for forgiveness for my sins and for those I had hurt. My last days were filled with peace and quiet. Surrounded by family and courtiers, I knew the end was near. I prepared for it with humility, but also with pride. My last words were a call for the unity and strength of France. I wanted the new king to continue my work and lead the nation with wisdom and courage. As I closed my eyes for the last time, I knew that my sun may be setting, but its light would live on in the hearts of the people I loved and led. I died of natural causes at the age of 76 on September 1st, 1715. Thank you for walking with me through my life. If you're interested in more stories from the past, be sure to subscribe to An Echo of the Past channel. My name is Louis XIV, the Sun King, and my story is a reminder that true power lies not only in the crown, but in the heart and soul. The past whispers, the future listens.